I've only gone and done it again. I just can't resist buying cars. And this week I'm introducing my new acquisition to the garage. Having sold the SL 500 and the Porsche Boxster in the summer, I'd always had that inkling to reintroduce a convertible, and I always fancied a German car really. Having started sort of almost 2 years ago with an all German garage, have evolved now to a garage just full of either Japanese or French. And so I thought it was about time I went back and sampled another type of German sports car. I've still got the MX-5, but the MX-5 Mark 1's now approaching 30 years old and drives like it's 30 years old. So I fancied something a little bit more modern, but trying to predict the market as best as possible, something that I think's bottomed out or potentially an appreciating asset. And buying in autumn or early winter is always a great time to buy convertible two-seater sports cars, because they're so much less desirable at this time, but it can mean you can drive really good bargains. And since we've sold that Boxster, there's always been the inkling to get into open roof down driving again. So here it is, my 2002, it's a late 2002, so it's a very late Z3, 6-cylinder, 2.2 litre Z3 roadster, and producing about 170 brake horsepower, front engined, rear wheel drive. And this video, I'm going to take a look at why I went for the Z3. It's Rich here with another fast and fun video. So why have I gone for the Z3? Well, I think the first reason is because they offer absolutely terrific value for money. So this very late Z3, it's a very late 2002, so it's a 52 plate, has with 109,000 miles on the clock, and I have to say it's in fabulous condition. It comes with full service history, and I have to say when I looked at the car, I gave it a really good deep clean, polish, wax coat, etc. over the weekend, and I have to say that the car's come up even better than I thought. And all this, as I say, for just less than £3,000. Now that speaks absolute volumes, because what other car for a £3,000 budget could you buy? Well, I looked at the classifieds and the market's largely saturated with MX-5s. Well, I've got one, so I probably don't want one, but even if I did, Mark 1s are incredibly difficult to find without the dreaded rust. Mark 2s are exactly the same, and Mark 3s, well, I just plainly don't like them. They're too big and they're too slow. There was the Toyota MR2, much rarer cars. They've got the mid-engined rear-wheel drive platform, but it's only 130 brake horsepower, and there's a few issues with those type of cars. And so I just thought, you know what, let me go German. I was certainly biased towards the German marques, but the choice is relatively limited. Yes, the default's probably a Mercedes SLK, but I've come from a Mercedes SL, and I just felt that the SLK would be just too much of a come down. There's the Audi TT Roadster. Well, I've had a couple of TTs, including the 3.2 VR6. Yeah, they're really, really brilliant looking car. I love the styling of them, but the whole driving experience is massively let down for me for the TTs. So probably for me, its most direct rival was the BMW Z4. So the more modern version of this Z3. But when I looked at them, it's this car that I think is the best potential as an investment, because I see Z3 now cars, I think they'll starting to slowly appreciate. They certainly have found the bottom of the floor, and I think a car equivalent of this, if it was a Porsche Boxster 986, which I also looked at, it'd be twice the price. It'd be a 5 to 6k car for something as comparable as this Z3. Now that might not be the fair comparison, because a Boxster will, even in base form, would have the 2.7 if you ignore the 2.5 early entry Boxster. So it would have more power. But still, this 2.2 delivers 170 brake horsepower, and that for me sits nicely in that sweet spot as well, because one of my criteria was I definitely wanted 6-cylinder. I couldn't buy a 4-cylinder BMW. Now that's not me being snobbish, that's just me loving the inline 6. It gives me something that none of the other cars give me. And even in the short few drives I've done in the car, I just love the way the inline 6 just pulls from low down in the revs all the way through. There's this constant pull, that raspy noise of the inline 6. Absolutely love it. And personally, I think the 2.2 is really sits right nicely in that sweet spot of performance, but fuel economy and sensible, because the plan here is to use this during the winter months and protect the Mark 1 MX-5. Now, whether that happens or not, only time will tell. Clearly, when the weather's atrocious and really bad, then the temptation will be to keep this in the garage and maybe go to one of the hard top cars. But the plan is to use this and use it well. And what about the way the car looks? I just think the Z3, it's just aging really well. I was one of those individuals when it first came out that I just thought it was an ugly looking car. It was a concoction what BMW came up with a front end E36 and a back end E30, mashed together, a parts bin, mashed together, that didn't drive very well, and it was an ugly duckling. Well, my views have changed massively in the last 20 years, because I absolutely love the retro styling. This huge elongated bonnet, it must be 6 foot long. You sort of sit just in front of the rear axle. And this long bonnet where it's almost like a clamshell, where it just wraps around over there's no front arch, because it's a clamshell that wraps around the front of the car with these cool sort of shark vents on the, or shark fin vents on the side. Just love the retro styling of that. This one comes with 17-inch sort of split rim alloys, which again, the consensus is out whether these are standard or not. Apparently they are type 71, I think I've been told, but again, the jury's out whether they came as standard on the Z3 or not. But I just love the look of it, and there's no mistaking when you open the door and you sit into the seat that you're in that BMW. I owned an E34 530 many years ago, and it's just the same sort of cabin. It's just so BMW. When buying an older, nearly 20-year-old sports car, or 19-year-old sports car, it's always a bit of a leap of faith. You're never quite sure what you're going to get, but I have to say, on reflection, having had time to have a look at the car, only in a matter of a few days it has to be said, I'm really pleased with the way it looks, with the condition of it. There's just a little bit of light curbing on this rear left alloy, but the other alloys are great. Inside's absolutely immaculate. There's absolutely no sign of any rust. All I can see is the slightest little bubble, and it's 1 or 2 minor specks on this rear left arch, and that is it. So to me, this looks like it's been garaged with the condition. I've had a look underneath as well, and it looks in pretty good condition, certainly for a 19-year-old car. It's not perfect. There was one or two things I noticed. There was water ingress into the fuel flap. So lift the fuel flap, and in there that was full of water, so I managed to clear that drain, and that's flowing out now through the bottom of the car, which is great, but obviously it's been blocked. Couple of early observations, I suppose, is the driving position. Now, I'm 6 foot. It's borderline for a 6 foot guy. It's not so much the seat itself. You sort of sit low enough. The biggest disadvantage I'm finding with the car is regard to the steering wheel. There's no adjustment to the steering wheel, and the steering wheel just sits too low for me. And what that means is actually the top of the steering wheel's taking the vision away of the dials. So I've got to slip down the seat a little bit so I can see the dials properly. That's disappointing coming from I'm not exceedingly tall, so that's just a little bit of disappointing touch there, that I can't get that seat any lower, or more importantly, the steering wheel any higher. Cup holders. Yeah, I didn't even think about looking for cup holders on the car, but if we're going to use this for commuting and going to use this for some longer journeys, yeah, who cares about cup holders? It's a flipping sports car. Well, actually, cup holders are quite important, because if you're using the car quite a lot and you want to take a cold drink, you want to have a coffee, then to have nowhere to put them is a right pain in the... Yeah, you get my meaning. And then as it drives, the first observations, I suppose, and I've not driven it long enough yet, so I want to get to know the car better before I do a sort of early impressions video on the car. But initial views are, it's pretty twitchy at the back for this only 170 horsepower 2.2 litre engine. I drove it a few nights ago. It was slight rain, slight drizzle, a bit greasy the roads in the evening, so it's quite cold. And I had the traction control, or dynamic stability control, DSC, or whatever BMW call it, light flashing on and off through a few corners, second and third gear corners, that I wouldn't have expected it to. I wasn't provoking it, it was just starting to flash. So that really surprised me. So that could mean it could be a really entertaining drive if you decide to select that off and have a bit of sort of sideways action, although I don't suggest you do that on public roads, of course. But one of the reasons for that is possibly, if you look at the rear wheels, they're actually really cambered. If I look down, I mean, visually you can see the wheels are cambered like that. So I don't know if that's anything to do with it. I've also noticed on badly surfaced roads, it does track around a bit trying to find its way on roads. So it's not necessarily one-handed coasting along. It does twitch and move a bit on even roads, albeit we took it up a couple of dual carriageways, nice and smooth tarmac, and it drove absolutely brilliant. So really excited. I think, what to buy. If I bought this car for less than the profit I made on selling my Porsche Boxster. So in theory, this car's cost me nothing, and what a bargain that is. And I just genuinely cannot see me losing money on this car. I just think come next summer, this it's got to be worth more than I've paid for it. I say less than £3,000. What an absolute buy I think this car is. I think it looks great. Love the split rim alloys, and I'm really excited. Looking forward to getting to know it a lot better. Right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. Another video. If you did, as always, thumbs up please. Please subscribe, because it really helps me, and stay tuned, because there'll be another video coming up really soon.